Hi, and welcome back to This Week in Voice, Season 6, Episode 7. Today is Thursday, February the 10th. My name is Bradley Metrock. I'm CEO of Project Voice. We've got a great panel today and some interesting stories I'm really intrigued to dive into related to big tech and trust. There'll be a major theme. And then we'll talk about the Super Bowl briefly, hopefully, as my Tennessee Titans failed me and are not participating. But it'd be a real short show if we focused on that. Let's take a look at the panel. And we're thrilled to have some great guests on. Jen, I'm going to start with you. Take a minute, share with us who you are, what you do, a little bit about Vixen Labs. Tell us all about it.
Yeah, sure. Thanks so much for having me on. Really excited to chat to everyone today. And privacy is always a pretty tasty topic to get into. So excited for the debate we'll no doubt have later on. So my name is Jen Heape. I'm the CCO and co-founder of Vixen Labs. Vixen Labs is Europe's leading full-service voice agency. We work with Fortune and FTSE 500 companies all around the world, not only in Europe. And we predominantly cover the five key areas that you would expect with a full service agency. Strategy, search, voice search, which is always an interesting subject to chat about. Apps, so what you'd imagine, so when we're actually building for the platforms. Marketing, because Bradley, as you often say, you need to make sure people know what you build is out there. The discoverability is always a tricky subject, and also wider content as well. We reach out into the wider audio space, especially around podcast strategy and things like that, because they're very often linked. A little bit of a background from me. I actually come from sort of traditional digital advertising and marketing. My background actually is within creative as a writer, and then I transitioned across to a creative technologist and a million other sort of silly innovation role titles that exist out there in agency land before I actually started working a lot within voice. Discovered that it was the perfect thing, and I actually just wanted to keep doing it forever. Very fortunately met my co-founder at about that time, and we created Vixen Labs about 3.5 years ago now, even though it feels like a lot longer. We're now about 25 people strong, and we have a team in the UK. We've recently opened a Berlin office, which is hot news. And also we have team out in the US as well on both coasts. That's everything from me.
Thank you for being part of the show. Great to have you.
Absolute pleasure.
Our next guest is Tom. And Tom, you're going to have to pronounce your last name for me, from Verbit.
Tom Livne. Yeah.
Livne.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Okay. Take a minute. Tell us all about you. Y'all are doing a lot of fascinating work. Tell us all about you and Verbit.
Sure. So first of all, thanks for having me. It's great to be here. So I'm the CEO and founder of Verbit. We started Verbit only 5 years ago. We raised more than $500 million up to date, and the last valuation is a $2 billion. We have more than 530 employees today at the company, growing very, very fast, and we are the world's largest AI-powered transcription platform on Earth. We are focusing today on 4 main verticals: the education, the legal, media and entertainment, and Disney is one of our biggest customers. And because we have John with us today, so I'm mentioning that. And also in the enterprise space, and we're growing nicely and enjoying every moment of it. And the reason why I started Verbit on the first place, my background, so I'm a lawyer. No one is perfect, right? But I remember as a lawyer how much time and how much money we're spending on the transcript of the legal depositions, right? And we were changing the vendor that we work with every a few months, and I found myself sitting down and doing the editing job myself. So it was really, really frustrated customer. And I said, it's have to be a better way. And this is why I decided to start Verbit, and, growing very fast since then.
Thank you very much for taking the time to be part of the show. Yeah, it's been fun to see Verbit's growth, and appreciate you joining us. Our third guest is John Campbell. John, say hello.
Hi, everyone. So,
John, y'all have got a lot of interesting stuff going on as well. Take a minute, tell us who you are, and tell us everything about what y'all do.
Yeah, so as mentioned, my name is John Campbell. I'm the managing director and co-founder at Rabbit and Pork, which is a slightly strange name for an agency, but there's a kind of a story there. It's Cockney rhyming slang, so for talk. So, and it's very difficult to find a name for a company nowadays. It's not already been taken. So that's how we found that name, Rabbit and Pork. Similar to Jen, we're a voice agency. We're based in London. We're part of the Heape group. So the Heape group has around about 75 employees, and there's 3 companies within the group. We've got an SEO and paid search marketing agency. We've got a web dev agency, and then Rabbit and Pork was the 3rd agency, concentrating on anything to do with voice experience. So specifically, we focus on voice strategy, building apps, voice search, and search is my background. I was doing SEO for 10, 12 years before I came across voice technology. And then we're also doing 1 or 2 other special projects, which is kind of outside the big platforms. But yeah, great to be here today, and really looking forward to the topics that we're discussing.
Thank you for being here. Thanks for joining us. And yes, we have 2 agencies on the show, but look, it's a collegial, cooperative voice environment. Am I right? Don't answer that. Okay, so we're gonna go ahead and get into the news, and so I'm really intrigued by some of this stuff that's in the news, and I'm going to take a moment and I'm going to read the headlines of these 2 stories, and then we're going to go. We'll rotate the order as we go through. For this, I'm going to go in the reverse order of the introductions, and then we'll rotate as we go along. Story number 1A from Android Police. Google, a big fan of safety, expands assistant guest mode to 9 other languages. So I like that. This is probably the only publication that would describe Google as a big fan of safety, but that is in the headline. And then story 1B, Apple says, and this is from The Verge, Apple says a, quote, small portion, close quote, of iPhones recorded interactions with Siri, even if you opted out. So, I think there's a story somewhere in here. One of the things we focus on this show is, and we talked about it a bunch in this season, is this kind of shift. Amidst the pandemic, we kind of put privacy and security on the shelf a little bit. We moved a little, further down Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and we were just all trying to survive. Now, we're hearing more of these type of stories where we're focused on, where privacy is coming back into the fore. And John, I want to start with you. Your takeaway from either of these stories, and do you think that your thoughts on whether the public trusts big tech at this point enough to continue to move voice and AI forward?
Yeah. So reading this story, it was related to this. I think it was specifically Safer Internet Day, and it seemed like Google were kind of just scratching it, going, what can we talk about? And they've basically talked about, there's this mode that you can use for kind of almost incognito via voice, even though it was released a while ago, and even now it says, this new feature to 9 new languages will come in a few months. Privacy is just always the kind of the top problem or area that people are concerned about. We did a recent survey. It's coming out next month. Number 1 thing, privacy. Why would you not adopt it? Privacy concerns. my view on this has always been, the worry is that these things, especially with the Apple thing, they're probably happening and we don't know about them. And it's only when, you know, it's leaked via an employee or somebody gets wind of this information that the companies have to kind of talk about it. And so it's always kind of worrying, and it's almost etching away at the public's kind of trust of these big corporations and companies. On the other hand, when you then ask somebody in the street, or you're asking a survey about this, people will say, yeah, privacy is a concern. When you get down to it, are they actually doing anything about it? And generally, you'll find that people will say, I get greater value out of this product, and so therefore I'm willing to kind of give up a bit of that privacy and those things. And it was interesting you mentioned about the whole COVID thing. You know, here in the UK and in most countries, they pass loads and loads of laws not related to voice tech, but just so like they could, you know, go without planning permission to put up temporary structures for testing centers and stuff like that. And there is a little bit of that now, which people are now saying, you know, we need to take a check on some of those rules that were put into place regarding apps and other technology, and rein it in a little bit. My worry is that over the next year, we're going to see 4 or 5 more of these stories. It's just going to keep on etching away at the trust that people have.
Yeah, no, that's well said. And Tom, I want to turn to you. You know, it's not my perception of Verbit that you're particularly aligned with one big tech company over another, that you're kind of agnostic. You can correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm interested to get your thoughts on either whatever might have stood out from one or both of these stories, and then just your general commentary on where we are as a society, as a voice and AI sector, trusting big tech.
Yeah, you know, I guess it's a very good question, and you know, I can share, you know, a personal story that happened literally a few days ago, and I guess it's happening to each one of us. That, you know, I was talking with a friend on something, and then literally a few hours later, I started to see some ads on Facebook or Instagram regarding, you know, exactly what I just spoke about suddenly. So, you know, you know, I do believe that, you know, as we spoke about the privacy, you know, although all the big tech trying to kind of show how much they care about it, etc. But eventually, at least for Facebook, all their business model is built, you know, on this information, right? So if they want to monetize it, so there's always the trade-off between, you know, like the privacy and then the offering that they give you, right? So, you know, so personally, you know, I still have hard time, you know, I don't want to generalize, you know, around the big tech, but there are few of those names that, you know, as the example I mentioned, that it's making me hard time to trust them on those issues. But, you know, eventually there are people that would like it, right? That if you're talking about something, hey, what you just discussed, you know, they're kind of giving it to you more accessible and making your life easier. So, you know, it really depends on the person you are. But yeah, it's concerning, right? And I know that all the big tech are investing, you know, gigantic amount of money into their speech capabilities and voice AI. And, you know, I wonder, you know, and when, let's say, you know, when, let's call it the unstructured data on the unsupervised learning would be able to teach itself and to improve the accuracy of the voice AI, then we're in a big problem, because like, who has the most amount of data today? It's YouTube and Google, and once they could learn itself with the unsupervised learning, then we can be in trouble, I would say.
You know, Tom, it's my thought that, well, look, if you go back 4 or 5 years ago to when Alexa was starting to come on the scene, you know, 2016 heavily, and then into 2017, you know, the thought process that, you know, we launched this show in 2017, and a lot of the conversations in season 1 and 2 of the show, and independent of the show, that were happening elsewhere, were that if there was something worth doing in the voice and AI space, Amazon and Google, Amazon and then later Google, and also probably Apple and maybe, you know, Samsung or Microsoft would just do it themselves. And so it affected everything. It affected investment coming into the voice and AI space, because why would we invest in these startups when any startup doing anything, showing any amount of traction, Amazon's just going to swoop in and say, just give me that, and I'll just copy that and just run you out of business. And it's fascinating to see 5-6 years later that it's the total diametrically opposed opposite that is becoming true, where a company like Verbit, which you know provides a lot of value, you know, value added services to a lot of different companies, Amazon and Google and big tech has almost kind of learned, look, we're better off yielding, you know, ceding ground to these upstart players and just working with them, because if we do anything else, the trust you know that people have in us is just going to continue to decline, and we'll end up in front of Congress. So you know, I think that a company like Verbit has benefited massively from distrust in big tech. I'm just interested to hear if you agree with that.
Yeah, so my view, it's a great comment. Like my view that all those big techs, right? So if you look at their strategy, they are playing like the horizontal and the platform play, right? While we at Verbit, we are more on the application and the vertical specific, right? So and if you look at the revenue from all those tech giants, and one they emphasize is how fast the cloud revenue is growing, right? Like in you know, Amazon is like $70 billion revenue for the cloud, and still growing 40+% year over year, right? So what they care about, that you will use eventually their cloud, and yeah, if they have like this generic voice AI, so and like they want to stay the horizontal platform and not really go into the vertical specific, although you saw the big acquisition around voice of Microsoft and Nuance last year. So and they're going more to the healthcare, so it's quite interesting to see the dynamic there. But I still think that, yeah, that like the tech giants really understand that their strength and the way to aggregate the revenue is to focus on the platform and the horizontal play, and give like companies like Verbit to go more into the vertical application and to really be excellent and expert in those applications.
Yeah, complete agreement. Jen, I want to turn to you. I want to ask you the same thing. You know, what in particular might have stood out from one story or another, and just with what y'all do at Vixen, you know, how you talk to clients about work, you know, having their voice experiences in big tech, or just how you interpret and parse this sort of information.
Yeah, totally. And I think actually talking about how we, and I definitely will come back to that point on actually how we talk to clients about how they feel about their interaction with big tech by being part of the voice ecosystem, is really, really crucial here. So on the subject of privacy, I kind of end up having two contending conversations happening in my head at the same time. One of them kind of really correlates with John in terms of the platforms need to work on building trust. And to that end, I do applaud Google to at least try and at least make an announcement, at least be clear in actually how easy, and if it is truly as easy as that sort of statement in the article said, how actually it is actually very easy to do guest mode. And also I really enjoy the actually having the different languages available and opening up sort of that diversity as well, because also we need to make sure that the ease and facility of these settings and things like that are not only English only as well. That's an important thing to point out there. And I do think that was not something that was particularly highlighted in the article, but I think is also very important. Google have always positioned Assistant as sort of the more the partner you can trust, in the same way that Apple tries to do that from a sort of iPhone and iOS iOS standpoint. Interesting, they've taken that hit now. That would really hurt them and really hurt them in that kind of marketing rhetoric and that sort of marketing positioning that they're trying to have. It depends how much of a fuss gets kicked up from it, because sometimes these stories come out and they die down, sometimes they don't. And you know, like that whole thing with Alexa, you know, doing those sort of peculiar recordings, and then more people sent in their recordings and the whole thing gathered pace. So we'll see whether or not it really picks up acceleration. But yeah, I think, you know, building trust is a real issue, and I'm not sure whether the platforms really take it seriously enough in terms of actually proactively getting out there and trying to talk about it. You know, talking about it isn't going to make it worse, it will make it better. We can't just keep sort of avoiding this kind of boogeyman in the corner. And I think actually, especially Amazon, I mean, I may have missed the memo, but they don't really talk about it. Google sometimes do, but definitely not Amazon if we're talking about at least those two primary platforms there. Also, you know, we have conversations, I can't name any names, but with big brands who are really concerned about interacting with big tech on these platforms and actually the privacy of their data. And even in instances where I can explain that actually it will not be accessible to, for example, Amazon, there is a real reticence. And actually, I know for a fact there are certain brands who actually either limit what they are putting up, like in terms of build-wise on the platforms, or are not going there at all and will only do it almost when they're forced to, where there's such consumer demand that they can't wait any longer. And that is a real crying shame, because these are exactly the type of organizations and companies that we want to be able to be playing around with, you know, through voice. The other bit of my brain is I occasionally get a little bit frustrated where the privacy concerns only come up with voice, because the horse bolted, you know, years ago in terms of our privacy and our sort of digital security and safety. And it is incredibly important. I'm actually not belittling it. I'm saying it should be something that should only be kicked up a fuss when it is around voice. And I'm not saying voice is the only time you get headlines, but definitely people seem to get more freaked out, and the whole like AI is going to come and get us all type headlines and the tabloids definitely seem to come out at that point when it's around voice, rather than you should be concerned just using a search engine, depending on which one you're using. So yeah, so I do think they should be doing more. I think we should be doing more for our digital safety and security in our data, full stop. But then there's, you know, whenever we do try and put things in, imagine, you know, the fuss that happened when we tried to put GDPR in place and everyone hates it, even though it's meant to be helping us. So yeah, there's a convenience factor, and ultimately people will want what will, in an ideal sense, have a lot of concerns, but in reality will just want what is often easiest to them in the reality of the moment.
No, that's great. And just great commentary all the way around on that. You know, it is interesting just to note that, again, looking back in time, you know, when Alexa came on the scene, and then Google Assistant following it, you know, you would see, you know, Alexa was first stop in the train to voice land, you know, and you would do an Alexa skill. You big brands, mid-sized brands would do an Alexa skill a lot of times through an agency like a Vixen Labs or Rabbit and Pork, and then they would use that as a learning. They would use that with the full intention of building on top of it and evolving it and learning and investing further. Now it's just really splintered, and you see some people avoiding it altogether. You see some people who will still carve out some little piece of functionality and where there's no data at risk and use that to experiment, and then they'll figure out what else they want to do. But it's definitely a different landscape. Before we move on to the second story, though, I got to have an Apple heat check here. And I want to ask both of you, John and Jen, and just give me a brief answer. And John, I'm going to start with you. Do any of your clients care about involvement with Siri?
No, not. I mean, a little bit of it is also because, you know, when we go to have a conversation, I will lead the conversation into the things that I know that we can, you know, work with them on. So we can't build anything with Siri as such as at this moment in time. So there's no real like opportunity for me as app development side of things. But we will always cover it as part of kind of voice strategy, because, you know, a lot of people are using Siri and that's maybe their gateway entry into voice search or into interaction. It did actually strangely come up today, which was somebody was looking in voice search while they were on the golf course, and how could they use, you know, a voice search to answer a question. And then you kind of said, oh, there's lots we can do with Alexa and Google and voice search, and there's this one thing that you can do with Siri. But generally, no, it's not a huge consideration at this moment in time.
Jen, same question for you. Anybody care about Siri?
Pops up occasionally. In terms of proactively asking, not, but people often go, so Siri, is that a thing? That's usually the extent of the conversation that is had. It's definitely an interesting point from a search point of view. Like that's definitely a hot area, and especially if you're working with a client where you are specifically looking at search, you really can't ignore Siri there at all. I think where we do talk about Siri is actually when we really try and approach things. And actually, this is interesting when you, as part of the privacy debate as well, actually is, and I'm really excited about this, voice is not just about the two platforms. You know, it's not just about Google and Amazon anymore. It's the whole incredible diversity. It's companies like Verbit. It's like it's a huge constellation where you are using your voice to interact with and gain information and operate elements and entities, whether that be content or whether that's, you know, like IoT and beyond. So really, I think there's a shift as well. So Bradley, exactly to your point of before, it'd be like, oh, we pop, you know, a test and a trial on one of the platforms, see what happens, and, you know, like a test and learn, taking a massive step back. And actually, and that's something we try and really encourage, and actually look at voice as a constellation. It's a modality, it isn't a platform. So I think Siri's still in the running, but I am come on, Apple, give me something to work with here.
Well, you both are rather.
Come on.
Yeah, you both are rather magnanimous. Thank you for telling me the answer is no. That's our Apple heat check for this week. We'll check back again soon, maybe. So we're gonna move on to story number 2 here. And Tom, I'm gonna start with you for this one. This is from VentureBeat. I'm going to read the headline. This is a report. 62% of organizations use voice technology to increase revenue, and this is the joint product of two friends of ours, Deep Graham and Opus Research. And I'm just going to read the first sentence as well. According to a new report by Deep Graham and Opus Research, 77% of companies are using voice technology to identify new business opportunities, and 62% are using it to increase revenues. So there's a lot in here, and it was really interesting. I just want to get your thoughts. What you think?
Look, so it's really interesting observation, because eventually, look, voice is everywhere, right? Think about our conversation right now. A lot of verbal information being exchanged, right? And if you can somehow can generate value or actionable insight or make it accessible, right? So you can really bring value either to your organization or to potential customer, etc. So, you know, we have a very bit different approach, right? Because we are focusing on professional transcription, that it's more driven by regulatory requirement, right? If it's like the FCC for the media or the ADA in the education space, etc. But in generally, like our larger vision at Verbit, that it's really to be able to bring value to our customer from their verbal information. And I remember when I had, you know, to invent a name to the company I'm going to establish, you know, this was what came to my mind, you know, like Verbit, verbal, to make it as a verb, right? Like verb it, like how we can bring a value from verbal information. So in general, I totally agree with the direction that DeepGram and VentureBeat's kind of thinking about, because we see the same. I don't know if the exact number that they gave is the right one, but generally this is the trend, and I fully agree with that.
Yeah, no, complete agreement. And I really hadn't thought about it. You have a great name. It's you should be proud of that. It's you hear all three companies on here have good names. It's like you hear so many plays off the word voice. It's like if you go into I'm sure if you go into like my Outlook or whatever, like there's a solid 10% of companies with like voice in the name or something. But no, that's and your overall comments on the article were great as well. Jen, I want to turn to you and ask the same thing. When you see this report, you see what DeepGram and Opus Research are doing, your thoughts?
I'm not surprised. I'm really excited that we've got some new insights there, and actually that there's definitely sort of a not only a broader market shift to seeing the value in voice actually from a commercial standpoint, and moving away from actually it being only a savings mechanism, although I still think there's a huge amount of value there. It's not necessarily always the sexiest case study there, but I think actually it's something of huge potential value for companies, but also that actually like to really be trying to go after the opportunities to create income and to create revenue. I think that's really exciting. I mean, we've just been talking about voice search a little bit before. That's only going to grow and grow and grow. There's really just only one trajectory for it. And we have a big survey sort of report, the Voice Consumer Index, that comes out every year. And in the last piece of data that we had, 91% of voice users are already using search. Like basically, if you use voice, you use it to search. And it is inevitable, looking at those numbers, that is going to lead to revenue somewhere. Voice typically does actually, it's taken a while to settle down, but now we can see the patterns that it really does actually match to the sort of traditional marketing funnel, really, quite remarkably so. So we just know consumer behaviors, and I think as people are getting more and more used to sort of asking, researching, finding, and then that is becoming purchasing. I liken it quite a lot to when purchasing on mobile came out, and everyone kind of said, "Oh, they'll never catch on." I was one of those people. I swore I would never use my mobile phone to like tap pay for something, and now I never take my cards anywhere. Again, it's that convenience thing. I think that there'll definitely be that tipping point. So I agree. It was great to see the article. Thanks for sending it, Bradley. I hadn't actually spotted it, so that was great. Some great stats in there.
We aim to please. Yeah,
and also naming is really hard. I just want to say as well, finding a name for John, I was with you at the beginning. Finding a name for a company is incredibly hard, especially if you don't want to say voice and you want to keep your vowels, which was the only two things. I'll tell the story of why Vixen called Vixen another day. But yeah, it is hard.
It's only going to get harder with a lot of new folks, a lot of new faces coming into this space. John, I'm going to turn to you. Same question. Interesting report from our friends at DeepGram and Opus. Your thoughts?
Yeah, definitely. I think it's just great to see all these reports showing that there's such a breadth and depth of what you can do with voice technology. And maybe 4 or 5 years ago, brands would have just been thinking, oh, it's just about smart speakers, or it's just about, maybe giving, my staff, some voice recognition to make things easier. But now, when we talk to most companies now, we can think of 4 or 5 different ways that they can use voice technology, and it's not necessarily always going to be for the kind of the end consumer. It can be internal, it can be for staff. And so reports like this just show that businesses need to think beyond those initial use cases. I thought it was quite interesting. Like the headline was around about the 62% of we're using it for revenue, but there was more. I think on that list there was kind of even more kind of use cases. So, you know, new business, improving efficiency, etc. But yeah, overall, it's great to see, you know, more companies thinking about using it. And I think there's also some good stats in there in terms of kind of when people are going to be investing, and it's kind of like it's outpacing at this moment. So basically, yeah, a lot of companies are, you know, in the next 12 months, you know, increasing their budgets to voice technology, which is really good to see. Obviously, most businesses have been impacted by the pandemic, and I know coming out of the pandemic, and especially here in the UK with Brexit, we've got a big change in the workforce, and we've seen now an increasing kind of living costs, an increase in average wages, and as a result of that, we've lost a lot of workforce, and so therefore, can voice technology, you know, be used to, you know, the staff that are remaining here? Can we use voice technology for efficiency? Or if we don't have staff anymore and we've got less staff, can we use voice technology to maybe, you know, take up some of the slack? So it's good to see that companies are turning towards, you know, not just Alexa and Google, but all the different types of technology and voice to utilize in this as we're coming out of the pandemic, and maybe into a financial bit of problems in the UK, but that's another discussion for another day.
Yeah, no, that's great. We are going to link to the report in the show notes on YouTube and in the podcast as well, for the report that was put out. And you know, it's not rocket science for anybody listening to this. It's, you know, voice is just going to continue to come into the fore, conversational AI, and it's just interesting to think about, you know, how much the pandemic accelerated that. And, you know, for normal people, maybe you didn't get it. Maybe you looked at Alexa and said, what is that? Why do I need that? And then you got in the elevator with those grimy buttons, and you thought, wow, I wish I could say floor 3 rather than touch that thing. And then all of a sudden you understood. So, you know, among many other use cases. So yeah, the timing is good, and that's really the bottom line for the piece. And it was really well put together. We're going to go to the final story here, and I'm going to read this. This is also from The Verge. Amazon's new Super Bowl ad features a creepy mind-reading Alexa. Scarlett Johansson and Colin Jost have a home that's a little too smart. So this article, so we had the Super Bowl Sunday, and you know, I get that y'all overseas call football something it's not. Here we use precise terms for sports, and we call football what it is. We had the Super Bowl on Sunday, and Amazon, as is noted in this piece, is now in a tradition of sorts of having an ad. Most of the time, if not every time, orbiting Alexa, and with Alexa front and center on the Super Bowl, and paying to do that. Jen, I want to start with you, and then John, and then Tom, I'll give you the last word. You know, any sort of general comment on Amazon? I know we talked about them a little bit over the show, but you know, the media clearly cannot help themselves. They just can't say anything positive about Amazon. They just can't. It's just not going to happen. Should this be a positive news story or not? I think we could start there. Is it a positive news story or not that Amazon's having this ad? Is it a positive news story or not, the content of the ad, and any other takeaways that you had?
I mean, as a creative, you know, if I kind of put my former life hat on, I think it's a really fun ad, and it's really entertaining, and it's great, and it has sort of an originality and a quirkiness that you want to see in a Super Bowl ad, right? As someone who works in voice, I'm like, can you stop making my life harder? Please don't make Alexa out to be any creepier than people already think she is. Please don't make out that it's gonna, you know, the kind of the AI hellscape that some people seem to think that we're hurtling towards is now going to include mind reading. Like, I just don't really need that in my sort of weekly client calls. So jokes aside, you know, it's a fun ad. That's great. That's nice. I hope everyone takes it with a pinch of salt and realize that it's meant to be a fun, jokey ad. It would be great if Amazon could poke fun at things like this, but then also address some of the issues about privacy a bit more head on. So yeah, looping back almost to the first story as well.
Interesting. Okay, so no, that's good. Yeah, I agree with you for the most part. I think that Amazon's in a tough spot because I think anything that they do will be viewed with the deepest of cynicism. But they keep trying, so it's interesting. It's actually kind of fascinating. But no,
that's true. Maybe they're in a no-win position, so they don't say anything. Yeah, that maybe that's true.
And you touch on an interesting point too, which is that whether an ad like this moves the industry forward or not. And I think that's interesting just to ponder. I don't know. Well, I guess we'll all learn the answer together after it airs. John, I want to ask you the same question. Is this a good news story or not, for whatever reason, and any other takeaways you have?
Yeah. First of all, commenting on football. I mean, it's football. You kick the ball with your foot. So I think we're in the UK. We've got it right. Whereas,
totally, John. I'm backing you up all the way.
Ground. Keep going.
Okay. Yeah, I think this one it frustrates me because, and we had this discussion last week on a voice lunch event in the UK, and there are so many films coming out at the moment which have this idea of in the future of dystopian future where there's a robot or a voice persona, and it's just kind of, this is further adding fuel to the story. Have a look for the trailer for Kimmy, which is a movie coming out, which is where, relating back to our first story, it's an analyst who's listening to voice recordings hears a murder, and it's like, okay, we don't need more of this in our industry. My view is, obviously, as Jen was saying, it's got to be kind of, it's an expensive slot, so they're going to use it for entertainment. They're paying, Scarlett Johansson, so they need to have it, be funny and memorable and stuff like that. Ideally, from a voice kind of industry point of view, it'd be great if it could do two-sided things. So it could be entertaining, but at the same time, educate users on a feature that can be used. I know that's a difficult request from maybe from a creative standpoint, because in the article it's talking about hunches, which is a feature of Alexa. I'm sure if you ask majority of Alexa users what are hunches, how do you enable them, what they are, they won't know. So it'd be great if these adverts in the future could hit the point from a creative and a fun point of view, but also at the same time, because they're going to be seen by so many millions of people, educate people on features like routines or hunches or something like that. But yeah, for me, it's this does not help. And yeah, we'll probably get some questions about, oh, how do we enable that mode where Alexa will automatically, like, no, that wasn't real. Did you not get the dream sequence in the advert? Yeah, and I don't know if Google will be doing any other ones, and it'd be interesting to see if there's any other brands in that segment use a voice assistant as their own, as a kind of taking the mickey out of that. We've had them in the UK where we had like a sports brand had their own version of Alexa using a sports personality. It was like, hey Harry. And so that's quite often we see those types of adverts. It'd be interesting to see if anybody else in the Super Bowl does something similar using voice in the story.
That's a good comment as well. I mean, it's interesting to me, just as an observer, to see what Amazon does and does not promote. So this hunches thing is super difficult to explain. And I guess this is probably, I would have liked to sat in on the meetings on top of meetings on top of meetings that Amazon had internally on this, because it's a hard concept. Like we're going to be listening to you more, or maybe the same, maybe a little bit more, whatever it is. And we're going to be parsing that more and coming up with richer context on you, so that, we can be a little bit more predictive and a little bit more proactive and a little bit more moving toward where all of this is eventually going, with AI in general, to where it's not all reactive and, and all of that. So, it's interesting that they would try to promote this, but then, they don't at all promote what I think is one of the number one use cases, at least for the Echo Show, which is Alexa, what am I holding? And I talk about this all the time. If I'm holding an object with the barcode, there's a barcode on this somewhere, I go up to Alexa devices with a screen. I say, Alexa, what am I holding? And it'll say, if you have a barcode, it'll scan it and tell you if it knows. If it doesn't, it'll try to scan it and machine learning style tell you. Either way, it's well documented that that's a transformative and absolutely drop dead essential feature for a healthy subset of the population with vision impairment. And it's like, they haven't advertised that at all. And that's just one example. I don't mean to go down a rabbit hole, but it's just super interesting to see what they do and do not deem worthy to promote. And Tom, I'm going to go to you with the last word on this. Is this a good news story or not in your mind? And your comments, anything else you took away from the piece?
Yeah, sure. So first of all, I have to admit that here in Israel, we don't really follow the football. So I just heard it for the first time from you. And I was thinking, as you said that, so for me, first of all, I really want to see that it actually works, right? So I have doubts that, it's actually, if I understood correctly, it could read your minds, right? This is what you said, right? So I'm very skeptical about how it could really work. But if I'm thinking about from the Amazon perspective, right? So their goal with these ads is to get the your curiosity, etc. And when you said it, okay, now I'm curious to really check it out, see how it works, etc. And then this is how they measure the ROI of it. And I guess that most of the people will react with curiosity, like me, to see, oh, would it actually going to work or not? And this is eventually what they wanted to achieve, in my point of view.
No, you're right. I mean, they this will be successful in getting people talking. I think this is some initial evidence, and they've what is in their favor is they've got, I don't remember the exact number from the article, 7 years running of doing a Super Bowl ad. So, we can give them some benefit of the doubt that, that the marketing team knows what does and does not work, or that they at least have some data on what they think works or doesn't work. That point's well taken. And we'll forget about what you said about not knowing about football. We'll just overlook that conveniently. Folks, appreciate you taking the time. Jen, John, Tom, thanks for being part of the show. Thanks for taking the time to share not just your experience and expertise with me, but with the audience as well.
Thanks for having us.
Appreciate all of y'all. And so for This Week in Voice, Season 6, Episode 7, thank you for listening on your podcast provider of choice. Thanks for watching. If you're watching us on YouTube, until next time.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Got to get my mouse down there.